Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be min-maxing the Ejoris Ascendancy tree for the new Echoes of the Atlas expansion. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. This is Ascendancy number 2 on the 8 Ascendancy list of videos, and what can we expect? Well, Ejoris has Incursion, Metamorph, Delirium, and Parandis. Definitely a couple of heavy hitters in there with Metamorph and Delirium. Very, very powerful indeed. But let's kick it off with Parandis. So we're going to try and skim through this one pretty quick, as I don't believe it holds the same weight as some of the other contenders here on this tree. So first up, the node on the start is Prospero's Promise. Area contains an additional Parandis chest. A Parandis chest is essentially a locked chest which is timed somewhat, so it's like a delayed strongbox, and it has about the same amount of monsters around it, so anywhere between 2 to 3 packs of Parandis monsters. So it's essentially an inferior chest with inferior loot inside it as well. Traditionally, Parandis chests drop Parandis coins, which could be worth something, but with the reintroduction of Harvest and most likely the reintroduction of the Parandis coin unique smashing method, where you can get tens of thousands of coins versus 100 or so from a map, which you traditionally get, this is probably not going to be relevant. So it's basically an inferior chest. Think of it like that. It's like one strongbox, but not as good. In addition to that, you also have a 1 in 5 chance in every map you run in Ejoris to have a Kadiro Parandis, which is quite strong. When you compare this to a rusted Parandis Scarab, which generally runs around 0.5 to 1 chaos, this is a little bit worse than that. A rusted Parandis Scarab gives 2 Parandis chests and 33% chance for Kadiro Parandis, so it's essentially got about a 0.25 to 0.5% chaos kind of value in like the economy's kind of rating of this mechanic itself. Of course, you don't consume a Scarab slot, but it is definitely not a powerful effect compared to something like a Legion, for example. So definitely on the weaker side. Moving on to the next node, Friend of the Family. This is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. Kadiro Parandis offers the rarest of 5 chosen items. So this essentially, when you come up and roll up to your man Kadiro, he's essentially going to generate 5 items and choose the rarest of them. So if the 5 items were, 4 trash ones and an exalt, you're going to get the exalt. If it was 4 trash ones and a headhunter, he'll offer you the headhunter, etc. So this is going to increase the chance that you're going to get an item you want by 5 times. And this, in my opinion, is fairly fair to interpret it as 5 times the amount of Kadiros, and a 5 times multiplier on them. So, for example, if you were to put a gilded Parandis Scarab into the map device with this talent, you could assess that as 5 Kadiro Parandises in your map, even though you're only talking to 1, because you're getting the value from 5 of them. Most Kadiros you talk to will not yield anything you want to purchase. So I think that is fairly fair. So when you combine the 2 modifiers together, you essentially have a 100% chance to encounter Kadiro Parandis in every map. Is that worth it for 4 Ascendancy points? Absolutely not. In my opinion, compared to the other things we have on this tree, Parandis just isn't competitive, and there's no situation early or late in the league where I would consider taking Parandis, unless you're just really a big fan of the mechanic and you really want to have a bit of fun or gamble on trying to get a headhunter or something like that from Kadiro. So very, very interesting there. Let's move on to Metamorph. This is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. So let's start off with Escaped Experiment down here. Areas contain a rogue Metamorph. So a rogue Metamorph is essentially a pre-constructed Metamorph with random parts that will exist in the map already. So it could off-screen you, it could be pretty scary, but the rewards are there. So a Metamorph is a unique monster, similar to a map boss. Now, map bosses guarantee a certain percentage of map drops, Metamorphs do not. But when you're assessing them for everything else, like rare drops, unique drops, loot drops in general, they are fairly similar, with the difference that Metamorphs have an additional more multiplier of around 50% more quant on the very worst case scenario, all the way up to double quant in the best case scenario. So when you're assessing a rare Metamorph, it's essentially 1.5-ish map bosses worth of loot, worst case scenario without the map modifier that map bosses have. So it's actually quite powerful. In addition to that, rogue Metamorphs also have a chance to be constructed with parts that have bonus loot on them. So when you're constructing a Metamorph and you see catalysts, a rogue Metamorph has a chance to have that as well. Chances are it's probably going to have at least 1 reward in it, making it this very, very worth it. So pretty good indeed. In addition to that, is also a unique boss for the purposes of, you know, sextants, getting more juice out of Delirium, etc. Very, very good. It will drop more Simulacrum Splinters than a normal monster will, and it'll guarantee it. Very, very cool indeed. So Escape Experiment is actually so powerful, this will be the first node I'm most likely taking in this tree, because it's just more juice, more chance at maps. Not guaranteed, but it is a very good, powerful mob that could give a lot of maps. It could give Metamorph juice, and it's in every single map you run, which is extremely powerful. And anything that is guaranteed, I really like on these Ascendancies. Next up, find a sample. So this works pretty well with all Metamorphs. Not only the Escaped Experiment will benefit from this, but all Metamorphs will benefit from this. So it obviously is pretty spooky here. Metamorphs deal 50% more damage and have 100% more life. This is absolutely not a node you want to be picking up as your second or third node. You want to be picking it up like fourth or fifth. So I'd probably go up and grab some Delirium nodes or some Incursion nodes before you dive into finer samples, because you could absolutely lock yourself from being able to do any Metamorphs on your early league start character. But the reward is 50% chance for rewards for Metamorphs in areas to be doubled. So that is absolutely exactly like Vindiria works in Heist. If you didn't play Heist, it's essentially a straight up duplication of all items they drop. So if it was going to drop an Exalt, it drops 2 Exalts. If it was going to drop a Fertile Catalyst, 2 Fertile Catalysts. It's very, very satisfying to see that, and it is a lot of fun, especially with that mechanic. However, there is a quick caveat here. This isn't straight up 50% more loot, because Metamorphs already have this mechanic. As you add high quality pieces to a Metamorph when you're assembling it, you actually get a chance to double the loot already. It ranges anywhere between 15 to about 37% in my testing. So that is quite high already, and you're adding the 50% to that. It's not a more multiplier, it's additive. So you'll end up with something like, you know, 87% on the high end instead of 37%. Definitely an improvement, but it's not a straight up 50% more double chance. So very, very powerful node that you consider picking up later on if you're running Metamorph, and synergizes this very well with Escaped Experiment. So let's move on. Delirium. These mods are very highly anticipated. Most people are very excited about them, but I don't think they read quite as well as you would think, and we're going to get into why that is. Some of them are extremely powerful, some of them are not. So let's start off with pathological. Maps found in areas have 10% chance to have layers of Delirium. So what does this mean? A map having layers of Delirium essentially means it has Delirium orbs applied to it. So one layer, for example, would be 1 Delirium orb, which would be 20%. This says layers, multiple, so it could have anywhere between 1 to 5. That is the assumption, with 5 being far more rare. Now, when you're mapping, it has a 10% chance for any map that you drop in the area to be affected by this effect. So when you're mapping, 1 in 10 maps will have a free Delirium on it, one minimum, all the way up to 5 Delirium orbs on it for free. So this is an incredibly powerful mechanic, and it will give you a lot of extra juice. However, selling these maps and realizing their value in terms of trading them to another player, I feel will be difficult. So when you're taking this node, you're probably going to want to run the maps yourself, especially because it could drop on random white maps, it could drop on random bad layouts. It's most likely you're going to have to take responsibility for realizing the profit from this node yourself. So your build will probably need to be potentially able to do Delirium and the Delirious maps that drop. So pretty cool there. Next up, Persecutory Delusion. So Delirium encounters in areas are 100% more likely to spawn unique bosses. So with some very preliminary testing, 1 orb generally spawns a boss like 1 in 3 times, 2 orbs is fairly close to always getting 1 boss, and 3 orbs generally always spawns a boss and has a chance for a second in my testing. So very powerful in the fact that you can double that chance and essentially make it so that running lower amounts of orbs can guarantee unique bosses. Unique Delirium mobs can give guaranteed stacks of Delirium Splinters, as well as unique Cluster Jewels, which can sell for quite a lot of currency early on and depending on the meta. So very powerful there. Now what this doesn't do is benefit 5 orb Delirium farmers at all, because they already have a 100% chance to spawn both Kosis and the big man with the mace. So yeah, pretty interesting. Very good for orb farmers with low amounts, but not good for fractured fossil farmers. Yeah, pretty interesting. But that doesn't stop there. So Delirium bosses in areas have 100% increased simulacrum splinters. So on the low end, like if you're using one orb and you're on like a, like a T11 map, you're probably going to get somewhere between like 3 and 4 splinters from killing a unique Delirium boss. Now, all the way up on the maximum end, if you're using fire orbs, you're on a T16 map, you can expect unique bosses to drop about 15 splinters. So 100% more just means 100% more. On the lower end, a lot of your splinters come from unique monsters. On the higher end, a reasonable proportion of your splinters come from unique monsters. Generally, you're getting about 150 to 200, maybe even more than that in some of these maps of Delirium splinters, and about 30 of them come from the unique mob. So on the high end, again, it's not as powerful as you would think, but it's a guaranteed 30 additional splinters in those high tier T16 5-orb maps. On the low end, you could be looking at getting 60 to 70% more splinters just because you have this talent. Because like your yield is purely from those unique mobs, so very, very powerful in that situation. Again, kind of targeting those lower Delirium orb count, kind of like putting one orb on and go. So Delirium bosses in areas have 100% increased chance to drop unique cluster jewels. So this is just a blanket buff to, all of them. Now, I don't think this is actually particularly powerful because as you get more unique jewels in the economy, the price will drop. So it actually may have an adverse effect on the profitability of these jewels. Unless people start corrupting them, stuff like that. But initially, you will get double the amount of unique jewels. It's just straight up a buff. Moving on to Compulsive Hoarder. So this is one that has gotten quite a lot of attention from a lot of people. Delirium encounters in areas have 15% chance to generate 3 additional reward types. A reward type is the outcome after applying a Delirium orb. For example, if you apply a Harbinger Delirium orb, a reward will be placed on it. That's the tile at the bottom of the screen. A Harbinger reward type will be applied. So essentially, this reads 15% chance to generate 3 additional Delirium orbs on your map when you encounter a Delirium. This also works on Delirium mirrors, but it'll give you the effect of a Delirium orb effectively. So this is a fairly powerful effect, depending on how many Delirium orbs you use. So we'll pull up the calculator real quick here. Let's say I ran 10 maps, and we'll just round it down to 10% for the purpose of this test. Let's say I ran 10 maps with 1 orb on it. When you apply 1 Delirium orb to a map and you zone in, you already get another extra reward for free at random. So you're going to get 20 Delirium orbs of value when you run 10 maps. So that's pretty good. Now, this is going to give you, let's assume it's a 10% chance to generate 3 layers just for my math, so it's easy. That's going to give you an additional 3 rewards because you have a 10% chance to add 3, 1 in 10, 1 10 maps. That's going to give you 3 additional rewards. So how much is that really in the grand scheme of things? So if you go 3 divided by 20, which will give us the percentage, it's actually 15% more exactly. So you get 15% more Delirium rewards if you're using 1 Delirium orb. Now let's change the math a little bit and say that you're using 5 Delirium orbs. So you do the same amount of maps, 10 maps, but now instead of 1, you're using 5. Right? Don't forget to add the additional Delirium orb reward, which is at random. So you get an additional 10 there. So you're running 60 rewards over 10 maps, and now you're getting 15% chance for an additional 3. So 10 maps, we're just saying 10% for the purpose of math, so we get an additional 3, so you'd end up with 63. So it would be 3 divided by 60. So it's only 5% more rewards. So it's actually very, very insignificant when you're running 5 Delirium orb maps. It's very, very powerful when you're running 1 Delirium orb maps. I wouldn't say very, very powerful compared to some of the other nodes on the tree, but 15% more Delirium loot isn't anything to sneeze at, especially if you get something good like Scarabs or something like that. So fairly good. Definitely worth picking up if you're using anywhere between 1 to 2 orbs. 3 is pushing it, it's going to start falling off. 4, absolutely, it's not really that good, and I don't think it's really worth that much juice taking it. So yeah, that's the assessment of that one. Hopefully you guys understand. I can explain more in the comments if you guys don't. Let's move on to Incursion. So, Vile Oligarchs. Incursions in areas contain a Vile Flesh Merchant. We have no idea what a Vile Flesh Merchant is. It could be the best thing ever, or it could be a complete meme. So we have no idea whether that's good. I'm sure that taking it early might be interesting just to see what it does, and you might be able to pay off massive. So if you want to take a risk and spec into this, you could potentially, it could have the effect to basically choose a room. Who knows what it could do. So speccing into this early is absolutely something I'm going to do just to test it out. But yeah, I don't know if it'll be my first point, but we'll discuss that in a little bit when I talk about the pathing. So let's go to timing again. So this, as in a previous node for Delve in the last video I did, gives you 100% increased favor, and we're going to assume that this effect gives you 10% chance to gain an album mission when you complete a map. That's the best way to interpret it, in my opinion. There is a few other ways you could interpret it, but we'll just have to see. But yeah, 10%, if that's how it works, it's 100% more alpha missions while running Lex Ejoris maps. Also worth noting, for master missions, the little nodes give 3% additional chance to get a master mission as well. So that brings you up to 29%, which is 3 times the missions when running Lex Ejoris, making it a very good incursion farming area. Keep in mind though, you can obtain master missions with harvest, most likely. Let's move on to time dilation. So incursion architects in areas drop 1 additional rare incursion item, and time gained from killing is doubled in incursion areas. So this is absolutely not a very powerful node due to the fact that incursion conversion gloves were nerfed, and those were the primary item people were interested in from incursion on softcore trade league. So I don't think time dilation is really worth entertaining taking unless there's some sort of really niche market that pops up and someone identifies it and jumps on it really quick. But I personally won't be taking this, and I don't see much merit in it, as time is absolutely not an issue for most builds in incursion. If it is, you could consider taking this, I suppose. So let's talk about pathing. So first up, for Atlas progression and those first few points when you're encountering the Maven early, I'm going to take Escaped Experiment. It's too much juice, it's too much extra RNG. You could get Exalts, you could get Catalyst to sell to other players, you could get extra maps, you could get just anything, more rares for the Chaos Recipe machine, everything. This is absolutely the node I'm going to be taking. Next up, I'm going to take Pathological, purely from the fact that you can get Delirium maps, and that can give you maybe a lucky reward. If you roll Scarabs, if you roll Breach, you can get a Breach Stone. It's just kind of a little bit of extra RNG, and it does scale well into endgame. This is absolutely not one you'll be needing to respec anytime soon, and it paths into other very powerful Delirium nodes, which are pretty good. Next up, you also have the opportunity, maybe instead of Pathological, to take Time and Again, or 2 small incursion nodes if you're looking to farm master missions. But again, I'm going to reinforce, I'm going to go Escaped Experiment into Pathological. Next up, I'm going to go into Persecutory Delusion, because this is the next best node in my opinion, and then I'll go Compulsive Hoarder, and finally I'll finish up with Finest Samples for my personal Atlas build. Overall, for Incursion, this could be an incredibly powerful node for the Flash Merchant, but we just don't know. If you want to experiment early, I'd probably pick it up after Escaped Experiment. But overall, Escaped Experiment, 3 Deli nodes, Finest Sample is my option here. The Incursion ones aren't too powerful unless you want to pick up the Incursion nodes for extra chance at missions. So that's going to be Lex Ejoris, guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed my min-maxing and I've justified my options well enough. But definitely look out for the next one. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.